Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, September. It's Talk Like a Pirate with a Mouthful of Food Day, I guess. A mouthful of Eastern Orthodox food, whatever that might be. Yes, time for yet another show, September 20th, 2022. I don't know whether I just figured that tongue twister was coming up or whether I was paying attention to an ad that came up, popped up on my screen and wondering what the hell could that be. It was a little bit of both. Also receiving messages that everything is just fine from Justice Putnam, who also, I don't know, somehow it caught me off guard today, is reminding me that I guess all the Queen's funeral is over. So that's all done now. And by the way, when I say the Queen, I mean apparently the Queen of England, in case you were wondering, because we don't have a Queen, and it's a little bit weird, and maybe I'm talking about the Queen of Denmark. Is there a Queen of Denmark? I think so. Queen of... All right, well, whatever. At any rate, that's over and done with. Everybody get their fill of pageantry, I suppose, if you were interested in that, and watched along, but I think we're all done now, and... we can never mention it again, and we don't have to. Anyway, plenty of other things that are going on that are happening in this country that we should probably pay some attention to, and I pledge to you that we will do that. I just happened to be watching this morning a Twitter discussion. It really doesn't even deserve to be a Twitter discussion. Let's give up on it, as a matter of fact. But it caught my eye. I think it's correct. But it does make you wonder, what do you want to, how strongly do you want to adhere to what's probably true, because the opposite would be crazy. I just saw some people commenting. There was a Guardian article, and I didn't grab the responses to it, but the Guardian article is, did Trump really hide classified documents in his former wife's grave? Not the Queen's grave. That's a possibility, but I don't think he was close enough with her to get that done. You never know. And they're not really good at moving paperwork around and getting it to places it's supposed to be. So probably, in all likelihood, getting it to the Queen's casket was just beyond his capabilities. But what about in Ivana Trump's grave? Well, probably also no. But just probably. I have to say that. So this is their piece. Did Trump really hide classified documents in his former wife's grave, or is the left now as bonkers as the right? Asks, I guess, Arwa Madui. And the critique I saw, a very moderate critique at that, was, well, look, on the one hand, some random leftists on the web say, as this person put it, that maybe he did that. But at the same time, the former president himself has gone full-throated QAnon in his latest rallies. Both sides are the same, and that's a good and correct point. And I saw people, giving their assent, giving their nod to that. But on the other hand, I just have to, in order to speak up for the random crazy people on the left, because there are plenty of them, I will say, in the defense of the crazy people of the left, there's a long history of doing absolutely insane things that make zero sense whatsoever on behalf of Team Trump here. And I was pointing out, just with respect to the documents alone, well, he wouldn't, he knows the law, the presidential records, or there are people there, he doesn't know it, but there are people there who are supposed to tell him what to do, and they'll be minding the store, and it doesn't really matter, he's a little goofy. The lawyers are there, they'll keep everything running, and stay inside the safety rails here. He won't just simply tear up presidential records that are protected by law. He won't simply flush those pieces of those documents down the toilet because he feels like it. They'll stop. They'll make sure that doesn't happen, or that doesn't go too far. Oh, he did do that? All right. Well, as dumb as that sounds, honestly, if you rewound a little bit, right? and you go back in time, couldn't you just have said, even as a defense of, the stupid comparison, or rather a critique of the stupid comparison that's being made, is the left as bonkers as the right? You would say, well, the president, he's even crazy. That's just a terrible comparison. But then you would say, sure, there are some random leftists who suggest that he tears up his documents and chews them or flushes them down the toilet. But I mean, come on, compared to the president himself being so crazy that he XYZ, whatever it may be. And I'll give you a list of some of those things. He wouldn't be doing that. Oh, he did do that? Oh, okay. That is kind of weird. That's embarrassing, really, for me to have gone out on a limb saying, well, that's just too dumb. Like, that's your fantasy idea of what Donald Trump does with documents. Oh, it's the real. Well, still in all, he doesn't understand the law, and I'm sure that they told him afterwards that wasn't acceptable, and he stopped doing it. And even here, it says that some people tried to grab the torn up documents and try to tape them back together. So clearly, this practice is an anomaly. It's coming to an end. They'll set things straight. It's not like he's gonna, grab everything that isn't nailed down when he leaves the White House and just walk out with important presidential records that it would be illegal for him to take. Because it's illegal. I mean, the people that... Oh, he did do that? He did that too. Well, but surely, it was just a technicality. Like some of those things that you create in the White House that seem like, well, there are documents. We wrote them, but they're really presidential records. I see, technicality No? There's more than that? Well, almost assuredly, let's say just to draw a boundary here between, mistake and truly crazy person, surely he wouldn't just take classified documents that are like marked classified. He wouldn't just walk out with those and be like, these are mine. He did. He did do that? All right. Well, I mean, he's pushing the boundaries. He's pushing the boundaries of the law. He's pushing back against what he thinks is a crazy there's overclassification in our system. He can declassify things, allegedly he can instantly declassify them. So maybe that's what he did. And they didn't get around to, but like for instance, okay, if he had nuclear weapons secrets, on him, lying around at Mar-a-Lago, or not even lying around, stashed away somewhere. If he took those, well, then that would be really a problem, because that's like the most secret stuff ever. Nobody in their right mind would think that they could take. He did actually take those. You're sure? Nuclear secrets? Are you positive? Because that's, well, that's bizarre. Well, okay, but I challenge you with this one. He wouldn't just, all right, so the FBI, how do they know he took those? The FBI find out? I mean, he wouldn't just tell them, like if the FBI had gone to him and said, we know you have these documents, you should just give them back. He would give them back, right? Because, I mean, obviously if the FBI knows you have nuclear secrets, if it's gone that far, he did that too. It was weird. How many, like 2-3 times? Well, let me just, again, I do admit I did say I was going to draw the line at the nuclear secrets thing, but let's say just for the sake of argument, I drew another line. That would surely be at the there's no documents hidden in his wife's casket, right? So, yeah, got you there, right? Yeah, there's no proof he's done that, so to say that he did is ridiculous. And there was even some pushback. Somebody said, well, if he had stolen something that was even more sensitive, I guess, this person didn't actually say, what if it was more sensitive? But if he had stolen documents that were that sensitive that he had to hide them by putting them in his wife's casket, they would be reduced to ashes at this point. He's not going to hide them. That's a good point. It's an excellent point. On the other hand, another excellent point would be, well, surely, I mean, obviously you're right, because he would never do something both criminal and completely stupid that would get himself caught in a situation that would be impossible to distract himself from. Because he's done that too. He does tend to have that problem. I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea for him to have done that. I don't think really there's any good reason to believe he did that. On the other hand, was there ever any good reason why he should be, painting his face orange every day and telling everybody that he has a healthy tan? No. That won't work out. Even if we know what brand of face paint he's using, even if he forgets to paint, the upper half of his forehead and his neck, and people see it running off of his face and soaking into the collars of his white golf shirts. That's, it's a different kind of stupid, a different kind of crazy, but he does do those weird things. Surely, though, when it comes to official acts, like he wouldn't, you wouldn't have caught COVID, been, allegedly cured of COVID, although it does leave some cognitive impairment, I understand, sometimes with long COVID, and he does seem a little unbalanced. But he was allegedly cured of his COVID at Walter Reed. And, by the way, doctors at Walter Reed really need to be reevaluating whether or not they should have done this. But they did cure him, apparently, of the COVID. He wouldn't, though, then just... Surely at that point he would be much better informed about the on-the-ground realities of contracting and recovering from COVID. He wouldn't go back to the White House, stand on the South Lawn, and videotape himself saying that he'd discovered a miracle cure for COVID, and it was so powerful that he was in fact going to mobilize the military of the United States in order to distribute it for free to every vulnerable senior in America, right in the middle of the biggest pandemic panic we had. He wasn't going to do that and then just walk away from it, not doing anything. No mobilization, no mass distribution, no nothing. And another 850,000 people die from it or something like that. He wouldn't do that because that's crazy. There's just no line that it's possible to argue coherently that he definitely would not cross. That is a stupid plan to hide documents in there, because it's the kind of plan that would be A, discoverable, and B, would make you look like such an idiot that no one would ever, it's really hard to imagine now that you stop and think about it. What sort of thing would it be that Donald Trump would have to do in order for everybody to just wake up in the morning and say, that's it, I used to like him, now I think he's stupid? I don't believe that the scenario exists. It's just not there. So therefore, I don't have a great deal of evidence to say, well, that's just, people should never say that. I know it makes it look like everybody says are we as bonkers as the other side? Well, again, I guess you could go back to the defense, the critique that was being offered, which was, well, he wouldn't just tie in his political fate with people who claim literally that all Democrats are vampire, pedophile, cannibal, blood-sucking, child molester, witchcraft. Right. He would maintain an arm's length distance from them, wouldn't he? No, he wouldn't. That's weird. I mean, well, what about just comparing the sides? Right? Well, I don't know. He might have put documents in his wife's grave. I doubt it, but he might have put, how about, a couple months ago, he might have put top secret nuclear documents in his basement at Mar-a-Lago, of all places, and not even bothered to lock it up. Nah, probably not. Yeah, you're right, probably not. No, but it happened. That is weird. And is it the same thing as saying, yep, he got the vote. He lost the vote. He couldn't have lost in 2020. There aren't 81 million vampire pedophiles out there who would vote for. Oh, there are? Oh, wow. Okay. That seems, I'm just saying, it's pretty odd. And there's really no reason to stand there and say anything that's alleged about Donald Trump. No, that couldn't be. It might not be true. There's plenty of things you could make up that he didn't do, that sound like he did do them, or that sound like he didn't do them, but everybody believes he's so dumb or crazy or weird or all three that he might have done them anyway. That's not interesting, actually. That's a possibility. But It's there. And trying to like thread the needle with the logic thing is not an easy thing to do, let's say. I'm curious about what they have to say about this in this Guardian article. And why not? We'll look at some more solid actual legal happenings after this. Did Trump really hide classified documents in his former wife's grave, or is the left now as bonkers as the right? And, you know, it's funny and all, and I haven't read the piece, and I don't know, maybe this gets acknowledged in the piece, but I kind of doubt it. And she's, you know, the photo was taken a long time ago, I'm sure, of the author, but she's looking at you like, duh. Of course, the left is now as bonkers as the right, or maybe no, obviously. I don't know. We'll see what kind of conclusion she draws. But the only way you're going to find out whether she's right to condescend to you, of course, well, that would be the genius of the plan, if to the extent that there was any genius of any plan, or any plan at all for that matter, is you would have to do something as crazy as exhuming Ivana Trump to find out whether it was really true that you were that crazy. And no one would ever do that. And so, therefore, you might think if Donald Trump was the kind of person who could actually calculate this stuff out, well, see, that's as safe as those documents get. But what would, you know, I don't know. No, he still wouldn't do it. Because ultimately, I really do think that's the ultimate truth of it. No, probably not. Because even if he wanted to do that, well, then, if he wanted to keep the documents, well, then how is he going to have access to the documents if they're there? He's not going to keep digging them up just to look at them in the middle of the night and then reburying them. That's stupid. But, you know, are you tan and healthy? No, I'm painted orange. That's stupid. That is stupid. Everybody can see it. It's stupid. You know, there's different gradations of stupid. Anyway, it's easy to believe anything when it comes to the ex-president, but hashtag CasketGate shows how liberals are just as happy as their opponents to embrace far-fetched conspiracy theories. And here's where the critique, I think, really comes in. It's not nearly as widely embraced, nor as seriously embraced, as even the craziest of the crazy things that not even all MAGA people believe, like that John F. Kennedy Jr. is still alive or has somehow been reincarnated and was going to reappear in Dealey Plaza in Dallas or whatever. So there's still no comparing. But anyway, poor Ivana Trump. Even in death, she hasn't been able to escape her ex-husband's drama, nor did she try very hard. After being found dead at the bottom of her stairs in July, okay, Donald Trump's first wife suffered the ignominy. Do we say that? Is that correct? Is that the right word for the pronunciation? Of being laid to rest near the first hole of Trump National Golf Club in New Jersey. Which, again, no, that would be stupid. Why would she? Yeah. Okay. I mean, it happened, is all I'm saying. Burying someone on a golf course is weird, even for Trump. And theories immediately began to swirl. New Jersey exempts cemetery land from taxes. So was this a creepy form of tax avoidance? Short answer, possibly, but it doesn't make much sense, business sense, and seems unlikely. But you're entertaining it, aren't you? I'm entertaining this one, but the other one is too crazy for me. People have their lines. The Ivana conspiracy theories did not go gentle into that good night. Instead, they grew stranger and stranger, stoked by the feverish imaginations of hashtag resistance Twitter, a collection of liberal activists who have built large social media followings by tweeting obsessively about Donald Trump. When the FBI raided his Mar-a-Lago home to recover classified documents, resistance Twitter went into overdrive trying to find connections between Ivana's death and Trump's legal troubles. I was just making jokes, but okay. I guess other people took it seriously. And I'm not part of resistance Twitter, so I don't know what they were doing. But I see it, I think. I don't know. I don't follow the hashtag. But it must have entered my timeline at some point somehow, right? There is zero evidence that Ivana was cremated, but many high-profile resistance Twitter accounts suddenly decided she definitely had been. Oh, okay, I guess. From there, concluded that Ivana's casket must have been stuffed with classified documents. Okay. John Cooper, a Joe Biden superfan who has 1.1 million Twitter followers and whom Politico once described as prone to outlandish statements that rack up retweets, bears much responsibility for spreading this theory. Seriously, is anyone And it's sick here. Wondering, is anyone wondering? I don't know what the problem is. Just a bit. What other stuff may be buried inside Ivana's casket? Nancy Lee Grahn, Grahn, an actor with 184,000 Twitter followers, had similar suspicions. Dear FBI, she tweeted on August 10th, I know you don't need advice from a soap star, but having been in 10 or 10,000 implausible storylines in my 37 years, may I recommend digging up Ivana? I don't want to recommend it, but may I ask whether or not that's possible? Clearly, it didn't take 10 pallbearers to carry a liposuctioned 73-year-old who methinks was in her weight in classified docs. Okay. Rude, Nancy. Rude. All right. It's a little weird and it's a little bit detailed. Let's see. That was more than a month ago. Have the Ivana conspiracy theories now been laid to rest? No, they have not. Some resistance accounts are still demanding the FBI dig up Ivana's grave to check whether Trump hid documents in her casket. A few of those demands, I should note, may have started off as jokes. That's probably where most of them started. The problem with the internet, however, is that a gag can quickly take on a life of its own. In 2017, for example, The Guardian's Marina Hyde joked on Twitter that Melania Trump had a body double. The impersonator did all the tedious work of being married to Donald while the real Melania flitted around having fun. This theory then got aired on Sky News and Good Morning Britain. And you had to defend yourself, didn't you? Jokes are more likely to take on lives of their own when they are somewhat plausible. Perhaps the wildest thing about the bonkers theory that a former U.S. president hid classified documents in a coffin supposedly containing his first wife, whom he buried on his golf course. Something else more bizarre about that? Okay. Is that you can see how people could believe it. Trump, after all, had unorthodox ways of getting rid of documents. According to the New York Times correspondent Maggie Haberman, he sometimes blocked the White House drains by flushing documents down the toilet. By the way, wasn't it always the complaint that the new toilets, they're the ones that are responsible. You got to be flushing the toilets 10 times, 15 times. The toilet's clogged. It's not the new toilets. It's you flushing, well, evidence against you down the toilet. Anyway, photographic evidence of this was recently published. It was an extension of Trump's long-term habit of ripping up documents that were supposed to be preserved under the Presidential Records Act. Haberman wrote, a commode one day, a coffin the next. You can see how people might really believe this is what happened. Let me be clear, though, that is obviously not what happened. Casketgate, is it obvious? That's the thing. I don't know how obvious it is. You hope it would be obvious, but it isn't. Casketgate should serve as a reminder that it's not just the right that is responsible for spreading online misinformation. Liberals are also to blame. They made me do it. You know, that works for them, right? They made me become a Nazi by saying I was a Nazi. And then just to prove them wrong, I became a Nazi so that although that would prove them right. But the point is it would prove them wrong about my already having been one. Huh? So there you go. So I can get away with that. They made us say, jokingly, that he had hid documents in his wife's casket. All right. Well, anyway, liberals are also to blame, except we should really blame the right. I am as fond as the next person of speculating about the dysfunctional Trump family. But when you start demanding that graves be dug up, that is a little beyond the pale, I would guess. Ooh, wait a minute. We don't say that anymore. It's a sign that things may have gone a little too far. But then again, sometimes he verifies the signs that things have gone a little too far, and it turns out that he actually went that far. I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility. I wouldn't want to be the one to make the decision on somebody actually petitions to dig that grave up. I'd be like, nope, I don't think so. I guess honestly, I'd be like, yeah, you really don't have enough evidence to make us do that. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, and here's another reaction to it. Here's Boadicea here from Texas saying, it's a fair point. The only counter I have is to how would he retrieve them for sale? And what if I told you the answer was digitally? I mean, they're not to be retrieved physically ever, but there are digital copies of it. There always could have been digital copies of it, and you don't have to put them in a casket. You could burn them like other people said, dispose of them in some other way, hide them in another place and just hope to never be caught. But, at this point, I think if you found a giant pile of ashes at Mar-a-Lago, that would be circumstantial evidence of his guilt in some sort of espionage crime, probably. Whereas if you never found anything, there's other ways of proving it. He may go down for this Espionage Act violation regardless, or by going down for it, I mean people will be walking around stroking their chins for decades saying, I wonder if he did it, but I really think he did. I don't think he's going anywhere in terms of prison like he should be, but okay. But yeah, I mean, what if they were, wouldn't you normally you would think that they would probably be distributed if they're just being sold for their content digitally, because why not be able to sell them and resell them to various high bidders? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a good point, but there's really, I guess the real point is that there's no such thing as a good point about Donald Trump. Maybe we can all just agree on that. There's nothing you could put past him. All right. Well, that was a successful waste of the entirety of the first segment without even getting to any real news. But people are talking about this, and so therefore, that's the newsroom excuse. Right now, I have to cover it too. How else did this person get assigned this story, right? Anyway. So there you go. We're going to take a 2-minute break. We're going to let a blue jay scream outside the window of the world headquarters of KITM Broadcasting Incorporated and make his voice heard. And then we'll turn to the other crazy lunatic who totally wouldn't do this because it's obviously illegal, so he would never plan such a thing, Ron DeSantis. Apparently an investigation being opened in Texas. We'll see how far that goes. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Now we wanted to get back to some of the other things that were going on. Of course, let's see, plenty going on in the Mar-a-Lago documents probe. Should we return to that? Stay on that for now. Let's see. There's a couple of entries in terms of further developments there, and then there's the kidnapping case down in Texas that's going on. We definitely want to get on to that one too. Let's see. The Washington Post and Talking Points memo both have some developments on the documents case and how that's progressing. The Washington Post piece, Trump's lawyers acknowledge Mar-a-Lago probe could lead to indictment. Well, they kind of have to at this point. Explaining whether Trump declassified documents, which was the center of Trump's own claims about this, and some of his team, but his legal team still hesitant to make this claim. Explaining whether Trump declassified documents could be a defense to a future criminal charges, attorneys say. So what I'm distilling from this piece, well, we should just read Perry Stein and Devlin Barrett's version of things. But it seems from the chatter about this and other articles like this covering this subject, it seems that, and we've mentioned in the past, that Trump's lawyers thus far in all the pleadings have so far refrained from, if not refused to say, refrained from saying that Trump actually did declassify some subset or all of the classified documents that he had with him. Now, mind you, that was being offered as a defense outside of legal context. This was in the court of public opinion. Trump and all of his lieutenants were saying, no, none of these things are still classified. They were all declassified because Trump had a standing order to declassify things that he wanted to take out of secure space and bring with him to the residence to, God knows, do what with, read, or, the claim was to read or study these documents, which is not something that he does with documents. It's not even something he'll do with the Playboy magazine. So there's no reason to believe he was doing it with boring classified documents. Unless he thought they were documents about, I want to see who JFK was having sex with. Is there really documents about that? That one I'll read. Does it have, but does it have pictures? I mean, I'll just ask. No? All right. Well, still, it's like reading a dirty magazine, which I don't really do, but, then now I'm going to read it for the articles. If the articles are about JFK having sex with people, I'll read that article. Also Mein Kampf, apparently. But okay. Anyhow, so that was always his excuse. But the lawyers so far have refused to say anything about it in the pleadings, probably because, they're in a different position. They can be punished for saying that if it's not true and there's no plausible basis for saying so. And, you can get into all kinds of trouble as an officer of the court. And, Trump hasn't yet been asked about this in a context where he can be held to account legally on the spot anyway. And so we don't have any real answer from him about that. Now, this case is progressing to a point, a special master having been appointed, it's now progressing to a point where the special master will start asking, okay, well, I'm supposed to be separating the different classes of documents that you have. Some would be classified, some would be perhaps formerly classified, but now allegedly declassified. There might be some classification for provably declassified documents if they should exist. Things that are not classified that belong, but that still nonetheless are government documents. Perhaps that don't rise to the level, I think maybe everything rises to the level of being covered by the Presidential Records Act, so I'm not sure. And then some other documents that would be personal in nature that really aren't covered by the Presidential Records Act and, of course, aren't classified. And then maybe even more categories, things that are of a personal nature that would be covered by an attorney-client privilege of some kind. Things that are of a personal nature that aren't covered by attorney-client privilege, but that are not, somehow reachable by this case. Or things that are presidential records, but the main point is he's supposed to be evaluating things that would have some protection from public view or judicial review even, or prosecutorial review anyhow, based on some sort of claim of executive privilege. And that has all sorts of problems wrapped up in it, but that's the charge. So there's Judge Deary, who's now supposed to serve as special master, is basically saying, well, look, I would like Trump's lawyers to clarify for me. Help me do this job right. You tell me. Are there documents in here that were formerly classified that are now declassified? How shall I handle these things? And they refuse to answer. And you might say, but that's impossible. That's the whole point of the job, is to figure this out. You need to tell us if your client is the only one who knows, allegedly, whether or not these things have been declassified. I guess then they point to the standing order and say, no, everybody should know that they're declassified because standing order. But then there's no evidence of that standing order either. So that makes things difficult for an evidence-based judge. And then, if you're going to claim that these things have been declassified, you're going to actually have to do it. Claim it. Because otherwise, I'm just going to assume that this stuff remains classified, at which point I assume that the Trump lawyers will say, that's showing an improper bias. Why should you believe as a baseline that these things are classified? And, a good answer is they're stamped classified. Well, that's just because they haven't had declassified written on them. I know. And I'm asking you, is there any reason to believe that declassified would eventually have been written or stamped on them? Or not. And apparently Trump's lawyers say, well, we don't have to tell you that because that would be giving away our defense. Now, the article's much more coherent expression of this, I'm sure. Maybe there's just no way to coherently express this. The Justice Department and lawyers for Donald Trump filed separate proposals Monday for conducting an outside review of documents seized at the former president's Mar-a-Lago home, with key disagreements over how the process should work, and Trump's team acknowledging that the criminal probe could lead to an indictment. Both sides referenced a draft plan given to them by Judge Raymond J. Dearie, the newly appointed special master. Trump's lawyers expressed concern that Dearie posed questions about the documents that the judge who appointed Dearie has left unasked, arguing that Trump might be left at a legal disadvantage if he answered them at this stage of the process. That, I think, should have nothing to do with whether or not Judge Cannon ever asked those questions. There's plenty of, I can't say good reason, but plenty of reasons why Judge Cannon wouldn't have asked these questions. One of the less bad, believe it or not, is she's just lazy. I mean, I don't know if she really is, but that would be an excuse. And she could say, well, this was going to be left. The whole point of having a special master was because these were questions that would take up too much of the court's time. We're going to appoint a special master. That's what special masters are for, to take care of this thorny issue for us. So yeah, I didn't ask the questions of whether or not these things were still classified or ever had been declassified, because that's for the special master to ask. So it's no answer all by itself for Trump's team to say, well, you can't ask these questions because Judge Cannon didn't. Well, Judge Cannon didn't because she expected me to. On the other hand, maybe there are documents in Ivana's grave and Judge Cannon never intended to ask that question and won't allow Judge Dearie to ask it either. I don't know. Maybe she's crazy. I have no idea yet. But these are things you have to entertain in a world where a guy paints his face orange and not a, human skin tone orange and says, I'm just tan because of how healthy I am. Don't you see the health radiating from me? Anyway, specifically, the legal team objected to what it said was Dearie's request that it disclose specific information regarding declassification to the court and to the government. Well, who the F else are you going to disclose declassification information to? That's who deals. What's the point of knowing whether something's classified or declassified or not if you're not going to tell the government or the courts about it? You can't prosecute anybody for distributing the secrets, and you can't prosecute anybody from taking these documents, and then there's no such thing as a classification system. Okay. Judge Eileen M. Cannon, who is overseeing the special master and document review process, has not asked Trump's lawyers to address whether about 100 documents with classified markings that were seized by the FBI on August 8th might in fact not be classified. Trump's lawyers have repeatedly suggested in court filings that the former president could have declassified the documents, but they have not actually asserted that he did so. That's going to become important at some point. In Monday's filings, Trump's lawyers wrote that they don't want Dearie to force Trump to fully and specifically disclose a defense to the merits of any subsequent indictment without such a requirement being evident in the district court's order. A remarkable statement that acknowledges at least the possibility that the former president or his aides could be criminally charged. If you ask me, that statement is remarkable for a different reason, which is that for some reason, I guess Trump's team thinks that they should be able to offer a defense that they don't have to articulate at any point. Or maybe they're claiming, well, we'll only articulate it when we get to trial. But for them to have demanded a special master in the first place and now argue that they should be allowed to prevent the special master from doing any part of the job that they demanded he do seems as remarkable a statement as that you acknowledge that you might get indicted. I think probably the search warrant should have been a pretty good, and the fact that they came up with classified documents was a pretty good indication that you might get indicted because you broke the law. Now it's just a question of how comfortable do we feel indicting a former president. The Justice Department is investigating the possible mishandling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago and the possible hiding or destroying of government records, which would lead you to wonder about whether or not, if you're going to investigate the destroying or hiding of records, why wouldn't you ask about whether any of those records are in hiding spots? I don't know. A key issue in the probe is that even after Trump's team responded to a grand jury subpoena requesting all documents with classified markings that were being kept at Mar-a-Lago, with aides reportedly saying all relevant material had been handed over, even after all that, the FBI search turned up about 100 more such documents. Putting them in a grave would be really just too crazy. The government's filing Monday evening did not address how Deary should review the classified documents. Prosecutors said they were waiting to see if the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit in Atlanta would grant their request to stay Cannon's decision to include the classified documents in the special master review, leaving about 11,000 non-classified documents and other items. Prosecutors have said the classified material is by definition the property of the government and cannot be shielded from them by privilege. Like that's normal. Cannon's order barred prosecutors from using the classified materials in their criminal probe until the outside review is complete. Deary, a former chief federal judge in New York, is scheduled to meet for the first time with Trump's lawyers and the Justice Department prosecutors Tuesday afternoon. It's today. The session in Deary's courtroom in the Brooklyn Federal Courthouse will focus on how to proceed. The Justice Department's filing said a third-party vendor should be hired to scan the seized documents into a secure software system. Trump's lawyers would then review the non-classified documents and decide which should be shielded from criminal investigators because of attorney-client or executive privilege. Prosecutors would note any disagreement with Trump's defense team, and Deary would settle any disputes. FBI agents will attend and observe the scanning process to maintain the chain of custody of the evidence, the government wrote. In earlier filings, the Justice Department had unsuccessfully argued that a special master was unnecessary and that as a former president, Trump could not assert executive privilege in this investigation. Prosecutors also said that temporarily barring the government from using the documents in its investigation could pose a national security risk. But Cannon disagreed. She has ordered Deary to complete his review by November 30th and said he should prioritize sorting through the classified documents, though she did not provide a timeline as to when that portion must be completed. The Justice Department said it hopes its Monday proposal helps complete the review in an efficient and timely manner. So I guess their proposal of a qualified third-party team to scan the documents, presumably then to be able to share them over some secure network, even though yesterday's Twitter expert that we cited said that that was not even really a possibility, not a serious consideration, but apparently it is. So we'll see whether it's accepted by the special master. Trump's team said in its filing that the government should begin making the classified documents available for review as soon as next week by Deary, who previously served on the FISA court, or the FISC, actually, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, which handles sensitive national security cases. The Justice Department urged Deary in its Monday filing to check in with the National Archives and Records Administration, the federal agency charged with maintaining and tracking government records, as he conducts the review. It also proposed that Deary conduct weekly reviews with the parties by video or audio conference to resolve questions and ensure smooth operation of the review process. The government has said that it has already reviewed all the seized documents prior to Trump requesting a special master to separate out any that should be shielded from investigators because of attorney-client privilege. That filter team, approved by the magistrate judge who also approved the search warrant, set aside 64 sets of documents made up of some 520 pages that might be considered protected by attorney-client privilege, the government has said. So at least we have some answer on that front. So, it's a weird and wacky case, and they are making some, let's say, weird and wacky pleadings about it, some of which have no grounding in reality. The thing I had from Talking Points memo was an interesting bit of speculation. How about this? Why not me? The judge's credulous Mar-a-Lago ruling leaves some attorneys wanting more. Josh Kovensky writes this one for TPM. The rulings from District Judge Eileen Cannon for the Southern District of Florida in the Mar-a-Lago case have been described as wrong, illegal, and even corrupt. But Cannon's ruling, if ever extended to anyone beyond Trump, would open up new opportunities for defense attorneys or those seeking to challenge executive branch classification decisions. I think it's Cannon's intent that this apply only to Trump, which is a huge problem for, the rule of law generally, but also more specifically a problem for Judge Cannon's insistence that this whole thing, this whole exercise is about how nobody is above the law, but also nobody is beneath protection from the law. That he deserves, the ex-president, just because he's a famous guy that lots of people hate, doesn't mean that he shouldn't be entitled to the law's protection. And this is an equal application of the law to have a special master review and see whether perhaps an abusive government has overreached here. But if that's the case and everybody's entitled to that, you create these problems, right? Cannon's ruling, if ever extended to anyone beyond Trump, would open up new opportunities for defense attorneys. Lawyers representing clients in national security matters or defending them before white-collar prosecutions would now, under Judge Cannon's interpretation of the law, be able to sift through evidence that prosecutors gather even before the DOJ decides whether or not to file charges. It's a massive advantage that so far has only ever really been accorded to Trump. Every defendant would love to have a special master with a search warrant, and it would give you 2 bites at the apple with suppression of evidence. Harry Sandick, a former Manhattan federal prosecutor, now in private practice, told TPM. Cannon appointed U.S. District Judge Raymond Deary for the Eastern District of New York to go through the material and demanded that he begin with classified records, the category of documents that the DOJ wanted Cannon to wall off from the rest of her order. She's also barred the government from using materials seized from Mar-a-Lago for its investigation into Trump, saying that the special master needs to sort out what's classified, what may be subject to executive privilege claims, and what records are personal property before moving forward. The DOJ has asked the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals to stay Cannon's ruling as it applies to classified records. Deary has scheduled the first hearing, as you know, for today. National security law in the U.S. demands that federal judges accord deference to the government on what is classified and what is not. The decision to classify materials is an executive branch function. Bradley Moss, an attorney at Mark S. Zaid PC, wrote on Twitter that in 16 years I have never had a judge just blithely dismiss classification markings on a government document and say it's something that's up for debate. Moss also tweeted that my clients fight tooth and nail to properly handle litigation matters involving classified information, and the government, with approval from the courts, routinely hamstring us. Donald Trump hoards TS-SCI documents at his resort, and he gets to challenge the records. Cannon's ruling, if applied more broadly, would both completely upend how the law around classification works and raise bizarre separation of powers disputes. I appreciate the impulse to say, you know what? I'm not convinced that I should completely just blindly trust the executive branch on this. Kel McClanahan, executive director of National Security Counselors, told TPM. And I can sympathize with that. That is, in a vacuum, a reasonable impulse. I myself have that impulse all the time, and I argue for it. I litigate over it. McClanahan pointed out that Cannon had based her decision on claims about classification that Trump himself had not made. The Kel McClanahans of the world will not say that you can overcome national security deference, whatever level it might be, by vague, hypothetical, potential allegations made by an attorney, he added. The next steps in the case will involve two parallel processes playing out, the special master's decision and the appeal to the 11th Circuit. Deary's choices on what records are fair game for the investigation will be subject to review by Cannon, a process that Sandick, the New York defense attorney, said would be likely to slow down the investigation or any other and could benefit Trump in other ways. You might also get a better set of calls from a special master who is less accustomed to identifying classified documents than are the government's lawyers, he added. Anyway, so that's the end of that particular piece as well. It's just very interesting how crazy and convoluted this whole process has become. But that was the idea, and that's why Trump's team was calling for a special master, knowing that it would create enough confusion and enough appeals of specific issues along the way to keep the case out of court for a good long time, at least out of trial, rather, away from the trial stage. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy to say, all right, we need to separate out what kinds of documents they are. Are these documents classified or not classified? Well, we say they might be unclassified. Okay, well, are they? I mean, you're the ones claiming to have declassified them. Did you declassify them? We won't tell you. Like, I don't know how he's supposed to do his job at that point. And as other defense attorneys say, if we could tie the government up in litigation over whether or not the documents are classified or are not classified, that would be fantastic. We'd love to do that and keep our clients away from trial and hopefully out of jail for an extra couple of years. But we're not going to be able to have that opportunity because this is something that's afforded only to Donald Trump, the one who the judge says, I created this process because the law applies equally to him. Well, no, it doesn't. You just set up a process that nobody else can access. It's unique because he's the president, I know. But if he's not above the law because he used to be president, then why are we putting him above the law? Or at least treating him differently under the law? And the answer is, I kind of wanna. And that's about it, I guess. All right. Well, let's see. Other topics for discussion. As I mentioned, the Martha's Vineyard situation continues to, I don't know what, expand, grow, get out of control. Interesting announcement made. I don't know how much, credence to give it, but an interesting announcement made by the Bexar County, Texas, and I've learned the pronunciation now, of Bexar, Bexar, and they just kind of say bear, basically. Bexar County, Texas sheriff has announced, hey, maybe this whole shipment of migrants to Florida and then on to Martha's Vineyard constitutes a crime, and we might have to check into that. And he's launched an investigation, he says, a criminal investigation into this movement of migrants. Meanwhile, the DeSantis administration announces that they're getting ready to do the same thing again, only this time they plan to drop people off at or near President Biden's home in Delaware. Again, because of the extensive amount of social services personnel who will be available to meet the flight. So, they're looking to create more stunts, and they're able to command the attention of the media, certainly. Whether or not the sheriff is properly empowered to start this investigation, I don't know, but it's a good place to begin. And I'm a little wary because, of course, a local sheriff, I don't know what to make of it. There are so many of these weirdo constitutional sheriffs out there. It makes me wonder what's going on. But, and a sheriff in a place like San Antonio certainly could have eyes on a higher elective office, running for local, state, or even federal office. I mean, San Antonio is a pretty gigantic jurisdiction, so he'd have a pretty big electoral base. So I don't care if that's what motivates it, but I just would like to know whether it's going to be a serious inquiry into these things. And if it starts getting into violations of federal law, do they make a referral to the FBI? I don't know. But anyway, it's interesting to see that they're doing that. And now that DeSantis has announced his intention to do the same again, I guess why not? Nobody has arrested him or really started a serious investigation that imperils him to this point. Maybe the sheriff's office is able to change that calculus, maybe not. But in the meantime, I guess now that they've announced the intention of doing this, and I presume that once again they'll also be carrying among their flights, among their manifests, the people on board these flights, some children as well. I just wanted to let the Bexar County Sheriff's Office know. Amber Alert. Everybody, be on the lookout for weirdos flying into San Antonio, Texas, and kidnapping children and trafficking them to both to Florida and then I guess onto the Carolinas and then onto Delaware for no particular reason. So be on the lookout. All right, let's see. Other stories that are worth bringing up. Oh, yes, I mentioned yesterday that, and I think I may have included in the roundup, or given to Scott to include in the roundup, Judd Legum's popular info newsletter on the smoking gun in Martha's Vineyard. I think we know what they are, and it has to do with the documentation, the papers handed out, not the ones that they filled out the wrong addresses on. That's also a huge problem. But the pamphlets that the people at either in San Antonio or on the plane gave over to the migrants, telling them about where they were going and how they could apply for assistance. They, first of all, got wrong information in there, and second of all, make pretty clear now that there's printed material that there's some pretty solid evidence that they knew what they were doing was wrong and was never going to work out in any way that would help these migrants, and that obviously wasn't their intention. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's jump in to, or you know what we might do? Maybe we fast forward a little bit because, well, as I was saying, the smoking gun in Martha's Vineyard, Judd's entry at Popular Information yesterday was basically saying that he was, the reason it was a smoking gun is that the printed materials tended to demonstrate that they were luring people under false pretenses onto these planes, saying that they would be getting all sorts of resettlement services, cash assistance, etc., but based on miscategorizing the migrants that they were taking on board. They were categorizing political asylum seekers incorrectly as refugees, which they're a type of refugee, I guess, in the popular parlance, but where words matter in the legal context, there are certain benefits that go along with certain types of qualifications, and they mismatched them, possibly intentionally, perhaps by mistake. But then, if you're going to enter into such a delicate operation and hope to stay on the right side of the legal lines, then you might do a little research. But if you don't care about anything, you don't give a crap about anybody or anything that you do, well, then you might just wing it and get it wrong. So I thought I might, maybe the easier thing to do is to jump to Judd's discussion today of the attacks launched yesterday on the reporting that he did in his Popular Information newsletter, and why they're wrong. He tweets this morning by way of update, along with a photo of the sheriff of Bexar County's press conference announcing his investigation. Update: in a hastily scheduled press call with sympathetic media outlets yesterday, DeSantis' aides attacked Popular Information's reporting, but their attacks and their defense of the phony brochure they distributed to migrants are ridiculous. And he explains some of them in this Twitter thread. The DeSantis communications strategy is always just to muddy up the issue until people move on. So I'm going to take the time to explain exactly what happened and why DeSantis' response is absolutely meritless. Yesterday, Popular Info published a photo of a brochure that was provided to migrants to induce them to board a flight to Massachusetts. And, of course, DeSantis' defense is this was all voluntary. They knew where they were going. They consented to go, but they were given, of course, false information. That's a problem. The brochure suggested that migrants were eligible for a laundry list of benefits, including cash assistance and housing. But as Judd has it, this is a lie. In the press call, Taryn Fensky, communications director for the governor, confirmed Popular Information's reporting. There was a brochure provided to migrants to convince them to make the trip to Massachusetts. Fensky defended the brochures with two arguments. First, she said the brochure was accurate because it contained information that was copied and pasted from Massachusetts' own websites. But this is absurd. I mean, they were, but it's absurd as a defense, and here's why. The information was taken from a Massachusetts website, yes, but it's a website describing benefits for a different class of people. DeSantis and his team don't understand the difference between refugees who are eligible for resettlement benefits and asylum applicants who are not. And then he's referring to another Twitter personage, Matt Cameron, and his Twitter handle. Matt Cameron, a Boston-based immigration attorney, told Popular Info that this was legally no different than, say, promising someone who you know to have had no military service that they will be eligible for veterans benefits. Fensky's second argument was that the brochure does not say migrants immediately have access to the benefits. This is disinformation. Many of the benefits listed will never be available to the migrants targeted by DeSantis. And if the migrants are granted asylum, a process that can take several years, they could become eligible for limited financial and medical benefits, but migrants that are granted asylum could also receive those benefits in Florida or Texas. It's not a Massachusetts thing. This is why DeSantis' aides did not invite any actual journalists on the press call, just obscure right-wing publications that are effectively part of his political operation and Fox News. An actual journalist would see through these comically weak and inaccurate defenses. After the press call, the DeSantis campaign began publicly attacking, Judd says, me and my reporting. This is how the operation deals with people who publish factual information about their conduct. And an embedded tweet from the DeSantis war room that reads, "Ha ha, Judd tries so hard to spread disinformation, but he is so bad at it. What more can you expect from a Hillary Clinton staffer, though?" Etc., etc. Judd continues, "I'm not intimidated by this crew and will continue to follow the facts of the story," and of course throws a pitch in there, and why not? We'll do him the favor. For updates, subscribe to Popular Information. It's free to sign up. It's a good newsletter. I recommend it. He continues here. Cameron, the immigration lawyer, said the brochures were evidence of criminal intent or criminal stupidity. Law enforcement officials appear to agree. Yesterday, the sheriff, of course, really, in Bexar County, Texas, launched a criminal investigation of DeSantis' scheme. By the way, this was a brochure. He includes a photo of it that was so haphazardly put together that it doesn't even include the real Massachusetts flag. Interesting. So they actually got the flag wrong. I guess that was hastily put together after all. All right. Well, there you have it. It was pretty interesting. information. And, of course, the article that it all started with, the smoking gun in Martha's Vineyard, was very interesting as well, and laid this all out in granular detail, exactly which benefits go with which category. So I definitely recommend it. I'll include it again in the list of links that I give to Scott, and you'll be able to find it and then read this Twitter thread refuting the DeSantis team's attempt to debunk that reporting. It didn't work. All right, let's see. Other things to share with you. All right, here's the Miami Herald's reporting on the opening of the investigation. Texas sheriff will investigate Florida flying Venezuelan migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Interesting to have the Miami take on this. Sarah Blasky and Nicholas Nehamas are reporting this piece for the Miami Herald. Authorities in Texas have opened a criminal investigation into Ron DeSantis' operation to fly roughly 50 Venezuelan migrants from Texas to Martha's Vineyard last week. The Bexar County Sheriff's name, by the way, Javier Salazar. And he announced at a news conference on Monday that his office is investigating whether the migrants were the victims of a crime, saying they were lured under false pretenses. Many migrants said they agreed to fly from San Antonio to the Massachusetts island after being promised jobs, but there was no work waiting. I believe people need to be held accountable for it to the extent possible, Salazar said. At this point, I'm not able to definitively say, here's the statute that they broke, either federal, state, or local. But what I can tell you is it's wrong. Just from a human rights perspective, what was done to these folks is wrong. DeSantis took responsibility. He couldn't stop himself took responsibility for the 2 charter flights last week, saying they were part of a state program to relocate migrants from Florida, although the group of Venezuelans was in San Antonio. Salazar, who is a Democrat, by the way, called the flights political theater. He did not name DeSantis. He also said his office was working with a private attorney for the migrants as well as advocacy groups and was preparing to cooperate with federal agencies should the need arise. One potential lead, Salazar said he believed the Venezuelan migrant had been paid a bird dog fee to recruit other migrants in San Antonio for the flights. That, I guess, is the infamous and mysterious Perla. Perhaps, unless, of course, that was actually Christina Pushaw in a wig. In response to a request for comment, Jeremy Redfern, DeSantis' deputy press secretary, did not answer with words. Instead, he emailed a screenshot of a news story with the headline, Bexar County Sheriff Salazar says Biden administration's handling of immigration, quote, isn't working. So that's, I guess, supposed to mean even the sheriff's on our side, but he's really not. But I don't know what it was supposed to mean. It means they have no defense, I guess. On Monday night, DeSantis appeared on Sean Hannity's Fox News show and defended the flights. You're probably not interested in finding out exactly how, but the quote was that they were clearly voluntary and all the other nonsense you were hearing is just not true, except it turns out that it probably is. Anyway, so yeah. That's happening. I think I'm just sort of skimming as we go along here, but I think all the rest of this information is pretty well covered by other reports we've already read, and perhaps we can include a couple of other stories here before we get to the end of segment 3. All right, where's my pocket? There we go. Back to pocket. We got to flip back. There's a few things. Oh, yes. So I mentioned yesterday, but I never followed up entirely with it, how odd it is that one of Trump's attorneys in the Mar-a-Lago espionage case, Chris Kise, has some foreign lobbying entanglements that haven't been fully explored yet. And I guess the question of whether or not you should be sharing classified / declassified information with him comes into play, in that he has these foreign lobbying entanglements, but also has performed them undeclared, which is a legal problem for him. FloridaPolitics.com is the source I'm reading from. I don't really know much about them, but here are the allegations made by the writer Ryan Nicol, Nicol, attorney Chris Kise, to help this is an old piece. I'm sorry. This is background on Chris Kise long before he became Trump's counsel and all this, though it was probably around the time that he was making a name for himself in Florida and becoming part of DeSantis's circle. And I think that's how his name came to light for inclusion in Trump's legal team. And I guess at this point, this was investigative reporting revealing his background, despite the fact that he was moving into DeSantis circles. Attorney Chris Kise to help Nicolas Maduro administration fight U.S. sanctions. This is dated January 28th, 2020. So, it's been a while. A year before the insurrection almost. And just at the beginning of the last election year. Kise turned over key documents during the ethics case against Andrew Gillum. Remember that case? Chris Kise, the attorney who turned over key documents in the ethics case against former Tallahassee mayor, they left that word out, Andrew Gillum, and former, he was gubernatorial candidate as well. And, all right, whatever. Anyway, he's now representing a member of the Nicolas Maduro government, according to documents reviewed by Florida Politics. Kise is listed on a Foreign Agents Registration Act form to work on behalf of Venezuelan Attorney General Reinaldo Munoz Pedroza. All right. So, I guess there is here's the FARA form, although I guess it doesn't disclose either everything that he's done, or I guess, since this is from January of 2020, it's a little difficult to know what allegations developed after this point. But here is just the straight up disclosure, and I guess legal and straightforward disclosure of his work for the Maduro regime in Venezuela, which is interesting all by itself, even if it is properly documented. Kise is listed as in the FARA form to work on behalf of the Venezuelan Attorney General, Pedroza. Munoz Pedroza was appointed Attorney General by Maduro, even though the United States no longer recognizes Maduro's government as legitimate. FARA requires individuals or firms doing work on behalf of a foreign principal to register with the U.S. government. Foley and Lardner, the firm that Kise works for, or at least did work for at that point, is listed as the registrant on the form received by the U.S. Department of Justice on Friday, all the way back in January of 2020. FARA requires individuals or firms doing... That's the paragraph we just read. Munoz Pedroza has been dispatched by Maduro in the past to intervene in U.S. court cases to recover disputed funds for the Maduro government. Those efforts have been criticized by the country's National Assembly leader, Juan Guaido, who argues the Maduro government is illegitimate. The U.S. views Guaido as the country's rightful leader. Kise's work will be aimed at helping Munoz Pedroza argue that U.S. sanctions imposed on Venezuela should be reduced. Those sanctions are aimed at driving Maduro out of power. The legitimacy of Maduro's most recent election has been questioned. Inflation in Venezuela has hit sky-high marks as residents face shortages of several basic necessities. The Maduro government has also detained multiple journalists, including Americans, for critical reporting. But Munoz Pedroza and now Kise argue those sanctions should be pulled back. Kise courted headlines during the 2018 gubernatorial campaign between Gillum and now Governor Ron DeSantis. Gillum was being investigated by the Florida Commission on Ethics over allegations he had received illicit funds from Tallahassee lobbyist Adam Corey. Kise served as Corey's attorney at the time. As part of the investigation, Kise turned over documents to investigators on the Gillum case. The proceeding ultimately resulted with a finding of probable cause and a $5,000 fine for Gillum. A veteran of the Rick Scott gubernatorial transition team, Kise went on to serve the transition team for DeSantis after Gillum was defeated in November of 2018. Kise's work is also notable given his former bosses, Scott and DeSantis, have been harshly critical of the Maduro regime. And yet refugees from that regime are shipped to Martha's Vineyard for no particular reason, but okay. When Trump recognized Guaido as Venezuela's rightful leader, DeSantis seconded. Scott has gone so far as to label Maduro's actions as genocide. Late Tuesday, back in 2020, Scott responded with an open letter to Foley and Lardner bashing the firm for doing legal work in the matter. That open letter declined to name Kais directly. What a mystery. This is shocking news considering the absolute genocide Maduro is committing on his citizens. But why then pester the refugees from that citizenry with targeting and these flights to Martha's Vineyard? It seems inconsiderate at the very least, don't you think? But they didn't know that they were going to do this yet. Anyway, more criticism from Rick Scott that Maduro is a thug and a dictator who is murdering children and starving his people. No business in the United States should have any contact with Maduro's government, let alone willingly take money to lobby on his behalf, Scott said. But they should take money to fly refugees from his country, or political asylees anyway, from his country, all over the map in our country. The United States has taken strong action to try to force Maduro aside, but more must be done to bring freedom to the people of Venezuela. Frankly, I'm disgusted to learn that your firm has decided not to support this fight, but rather to support this flight. And is instead choosing to side with Maduro. As long as you represent a dangerous dictator who is against everything this country was built on, I refuse to meet with anyone in your firm or anyone that contracts on this matter with your firm, regardless of the many clients you represent, and I am urging every one of my colleagues to do the same. So there you have it. Rick Scott says boycott Trump's lawyers and the firm that represents him, and he hates them and they're disgusting and he won't help them in any way unless it's to help Donald Trump, I guess he would now say. There has been a renewed focus on FARA, as the act has been cited in several high-profile investigations surrounding confidants of President Donald Trump in recent years. The FARA registration statement reviewed by Florida Politics details Kais' expected actions on behalf of Munoz Pedroza. On his potential tasks include reviewing actions taken by the Office of Foreign Assets Control under the U.S. Department of the Treasury, which administers and enforces U.S. sanctions. Kais' services may include a review of foreign principal files, publicly available documents, and or interviews necessary to advise the foreign principal on the requirements of and compliance with laws of the United States, including various economic sanctions OFAC and other government authorities have imposed or may impose against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and the related parties. Also advising the foreign principal regarding the scope and nature of OFAC and other U.S. economic sanctions programs. You get it. It's dry, boring legal language at this point from there on. The FARA registration statement also shows Foley and Lardner has paid $2 million to Sonoran Policy Group for strategy consultation on behalf of Munoz Pedroza. Sonoran Policy Group is run by Robert Stryk, S-T-R-Y-K, a former advisor to the Trump presidential campaign, of course. And why not have that on in your rattling around in the back of your mind as you consider the ongoing Mar-a-Lago case? All right, let's see. A couple of other things that deserve some time. Oh, gosh, there's a lot. Man, all right, let's do this one. I passed over this one the other day because I thought we had already reported on it. The headline in the AP was, phony document lands on court docket in Trump search case. And I thought, oh yeah, that's right. It's the citation to the phony document from, Charles Pinckney, who was claiming to be the author of the original plan that became the Constitution, and that therefore it was his interpretation of the intent of the Constitution that ought to be relevant in this case. And I can't even remember specifically what the argument was that he was talking about, but I guess probably having to do with executive authority in some way, but I can't even remember now. I thought, okay, well, we covered that one. They were citing authority that was phony, but it turns out, no, it was something totally different. Michael Balsamo reports for the AP on this phony document. Get this. When a government document mysteriously appeared earlier this week in the highest profile case in the federal court system, it had the hallmarks of another explosive storyline in the Justice Department's investigation into classified records stored at former President Donald Trump's Florida estate. The document purported to be from, not Charles Pinckney, from the U.S. Treasury Department. What? It claimed that the agency had seized sensitive documents related to last month's search at Mar-a-Lago and included a warrant ordering CNN to preserve, quote, leaked tax records. Huh? Yeah. The document remained late Thursday on the court docket, but it is a clear fabrication. A review of dozens of court records and interviews by the Associated Press suggest the document originated with a serial forger behind bars at a federal prison complex in North Carolina. What? The incident also suggests, and by the way, this comes in context of the prosecutors, the Justice Department in this case, making a motion to the court to delete this item from the docket. It's unclear how it got there. Essentially, it was sent on, and the clerk of the court said, here's a document, and didn't really, I guess, look at it very carefully, and docketed it along, I guess, as, you know, a motion and something for consideration by the court later on. And it turns out some kooky jailbird in North Carolina wrote this thing and said, yeah, this is from the U.S. Treasury Department. I mean, I don't know how long it would have been before they took up consideration of this motion and realized how crazy it was, but it was docketed. The incident also suggests that the court clerk was easily tricked into believing it was real, landing the document on the public docket in the Mar-a-Lago search warrant case. It also highlights the vulnerability of the U.S. court system and raises questions about the court's vetting of documents that purport to be official records. The document first appeared on the court's docket late Monday afternoon and was marked as a motion to intervene by the U.S. Department of the Treasury. The document, sprinkled with spelling and syntax errors, read, the U.S. Department of Treasury, through the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Marshals Service, have arrested, seized federal securities, I don't even know what's going on here, containing sensitive documents which are subject to the defendant sealed search warrant by the FBI arrest. Okay, clearly you're like, all right, something's wrong with this document right away. But he didn't read it. He read the title of it and docketed it. It cited a federal statute for collecting financial records in federal investigations. The document also included two supposed warrants, one that claimed to be sent to CNN in Atlanta and another to a towing company in Michigan. Wow. Those supposed warrants, though, are identical to paperwork filed in another case in federal court in Georgia, brought by an inmate at the prison medical center in Butner, Butner, North Carolina. The case was thrown out, as were the array of other frivolous lawsuits the man has filed from his prison cell. The man has been in custody for several years since he was found not competent to stand trial after an arrest for planting a fake explosive outside the Guardian building, a skyscraper in Detroit. Since his incarceration, he has filed a range of lawsuits and has impersonated the Treasury Department, claimed to be a federal trustee, and claimed to be a lawyer for the Justice Department, a review of court records shows. In the Georgia case, the man alleged that Trump and others had acquired millions of unredacted classified tax returns and other sensitive financial data. Maybe he did. Bank records and accounts of banking and tax transactions of several millions of Americans and federal government agencies, the court documents say. The judge in that case called his suit fanatic and delusional. Why don't they do that for Trump? Saying there was no way to discern any cognizable claim from the incoherent filings. The judge The man has repeatedly impersonated federal officials in court records and has placed tax liens on judges using his false paperwork. Two people familiar with the matter told the AP. Because of his history as a forger, his mail is supposed to be subjected to additional scrutiny from the Bureau of Prisons. It's unclear how the documents, the fake motion and the phony warrants, ended up at the court clerk's office at the courthouse in West Palm Beach, Florida. A photocopy of an envelope included in the filing shows that it went to the court with a printed return address of the Treasury Department's headquarters in Washington, but a postmark shows a Michigan zip code. Pretty clever. And he's in North Carolina, so how did that happen? And a tracking number on the envelope shows it was mailed September 9th from Clinton Township, Michigan, the inmate's hometown. The AP is not identifying the inmate by name because he has a documented history of mental illness and has thus not been charged with a crime related to the filing. There is simply nothing indicating that he has any authorization to act on behalf of the United States, the judge in the Georgia case wrote. There's a little bit more. We're running out of time before our next break and possibly get it if all of our connections work right, talking to Joan. But wow, what a story. More after this.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan has joined us here. Now we got to segue out of this crazy story and into some, well, I guess it won't be any less crazy necessarily what we'll cover with Joan, but just by way of finishing up. So there's these phony documents filed, and there's only a paragraph or two more with this. I enjoyed the understated critique by the judge in Georgia that there's simply nothing indicating that this federal inmate has any authorization to act on behalf of the United States. But despite the clear warning signs, including a stamp noting the Georgia case number on the phony warrants, the filing still made its way onto this Mar-a-Lago case docket. Spokespeople for the Justice Department and the Treasury Department would not comment. They declined to answer on the record when asked if the document was false and why the government had not addressed it. Well, it is, and they didn't address it because it's false. But okay. Representatives in the court clerk's office and the magistrate judge overseeing the search warrant case did not respond to requests for comment. So that winds up the article. So all the loose ends from what the reporter had to say were turned up. No loose ends tied up in terms of how does this get on the docket. But I will contrast this with the Eastman plan for overthrowing the entire 2020 election, which I complained from the beginning. I guess you could call it a complaint, but said from the beginning, one of the big difficulties you'll have here, even if you forge fake documents from fake electors in these states that you're contesting, is how are you going to get those documents onto the floor and into the hands of the vice president? And then, then the separate problem is how do you convince the vice president? They didn't know what they were up against at the time. How do you convince the vice president to read these and say, I don't know, maybe they're valid. We should all vote on it.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Now we found out how they were going to get it to him.
Ron Johnson.
Yeah. They were going to pass it on. But even that, like as a plan, just, I don't know, if what's in the balance is the presidency and a possible, overthrow of the government or whatever. Like the plan, well, I got an idea. I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. Why don't you call Ron Johnson's chief of staff and say, would you take these phony documents to him? Like there was no plan on how to get those things to the floor. And that was the hole in the whole problem. This guy though, by the way, a federal inmate being held at a prison hospital in North Carolina because he's mentally not fit to stand trial for his case back in Michigan. It doesn't really matter where the case was, but the fact that he's not mentally fit to stand trial, so he's in a prison mental institution. That guy managed to get his phony documents delivered and docketed to a federal court in Florida that was handling a case involving the former president of the United States having stolen classified documents. There's a special master in this case to determine the authenticity and the status of each of the documents that this guy got onto the docket. This guy is smarter than John Eastman, and he's legally insane. That's amazing to me. And just one of several developments. And I guess maybe this brings us back around to the beginning of the show, which will hopefully, I think, have nothing to do with what we do now. That Joan is here to talk about like regular stuff, which is crazy in its own right, but a different kind of crazy. But the whole, the beginning of the show, oh, isn't it stupid to be saying, look at all these dumb people on Twitter who are saying, there could be secret documents hidden in Ivana Trump's grave. I agree. That is crazy wacky. But so is everything else on the Trump record, not to mention the fact that I'm looking here. This is the second fake document to make its way before a judge in the Mar-a-Lago espionage case, by the way. The first one being filed by Trump's legal team. The phony document of the supposed Pinckney letters claiming to have authored the compromise that ended up becoming the body of the Constitution. And so therefore you ought to be listening to Charles Pinckney's and then later Trump's legal team's theories about what the intent of the founders were, even though Pinckney was forging the intent of the founders. But on top of that, now you have people filing fake motions on behalf of the U.S. Treasury Department, which is supposed to be on top of this forging and secrecy stuff, by the way. But I don't know if they knew what was going on. But it's pretty amazing. And, things that should never have happened and are too crazy to contemplate, like just file fake electors or just pretend you're the Treasury Department, are actually happening here. So, in that context, along with, that orange face paint is really a tan, it's just too difficult to know whether or not it's fair to say it's crazy that Trump would do something as bizarre and stupid as hiding documents in a grave. It doesn't make any sense.
He did take all of those boxes.
Yeah.
From Mar-a-Lago to Bedminster. So, but the only thing that would argue against it is that they'd have to, dig them back up. And
it's funny.
If he has the documents, he wants ready access to them.
I guess so.
One would assume.
You would think, and that did get brought up, but yeah,
that's the only thing I can think of to argue. He is crazy enough to do this. Yeah,
you're having to construct these arguments that, in the modern age, they essentially make no sense. Well, why would he bury them if he has to dig them back up to look at them? Well, I know. Well, remember, you're just trying to come up with an explanation for something crazy and stupid, and it's unfair to put that burden on you, but how about taking a picture of them and then burying them? Well, why would he do that?
Which is entirely possible.
Yeah.
Plausible.
Why do that? Well, as other people said, one, they'll never be found. Two, they also won't be found in the form of a pile of ash in a fireplace anywhere and be used as circumstantial evidence against him. And three, you get to run out and say, well, the real crazy person is you. That's always an advantage to them. And as you know, every Republican accusation is a confession. So there you go.
And also the big tax break for turning your golf club into a cemetery.
Right.
The
tax breaks.
Why not?
Right.
Why not?
Sure, why not? It's also a library. So, it's a graveyard, a library, and this is cover all the tax breaks that we didn't get from bringing the goats in and claiming it was a farm. So they have that too. That's something that they did previously at Bedminster. I don't know whether they still do it.
Seriously? There are goats and it's
there
a
are
farm?
some goats there that graze on some of the grass in the unused property, and so therefore the entire property is a farm property and gets taxed at a different rate. That was another previous, rumor / maybe actually true. I don't think I remember whether they straightened that one out in terms of establishing the fact of it or not. But that's because I was distracted with, he buried nuclear documents with Ivana or whatever. I don't know.
No, well, and this is the rumor that I never have been able to figure out. Was she or was she not cremated? And if she was cremated, which everybody seems to be saying, why in the hell is there a coffin?
Right. So, I mean, that's another, that was discussed in this article.
That took 10 people to carry.
There's apparently no, I don't know where you would get official word on whether or not she was or wasn't cremated. So who knows? Maybe she wasn't. And I think the article I was reading alluded to the possibility that people just made that up, which I guess you could.
Well, and as long as we're going there, how did she fall down the stairs?
Right. I know. And it's not like people aren't falling all over the place in Russia. So who knows? You might ask all sorts of questions. And the difficulty is that Trump has made it impossible to say whether inquiry into that is in fact crazy all by itself, much less whether it's comparable to QAnon level crazy. And
exactly.
Yeah, so, all right. Well, anyway, that's not what you've probably been paying attention to professionally, but maybe you never know.
It's hard not to, but there have been other things happening that I've sort of been following.
Okay.
Because of course, August recess is over, Labor Day is over.
Yes.
Government's going to need to be funded in 10 days, and the plan thus far is kind of uncertain, except that it'll probably happen one way or another. It's just what's going to be added to it is uncertain.
Okay.
So you're going to have your continuing resolution that funds government at the levels that it's been funded at for the past, since they finally passed an actual real budget and appropriations package in what was it, March, April?
I don't think I could tell you which month it was, but okay, way back when.
It was in spring.
Fair enough.
So we had almost 10 months of actual
just
real normal spending.
What?
Anyway,
Weird.
The good news is it's at Biden, Pelosi, Schumer levels instead of Trump levels, which Republicans have forced on us all of this time.
Thankfully, at last.
So anyway, government's going to be funded at those levels until probably mid-December.
All right. Yes.
There's a new clamoring among Republicans, including the usual suspects in the Senate, Ted Cruz, Rick Scott, Mike Lee, who say we shouldn't do this in December. We need to stretch it out until January, when Republicans will probably have the House of Representatives, and we can end the tyranny of this Democratic budget.
Yes.
Democrat. I'm sorry. They don't say Democratic.
Yes, right. Well, when you're talking about tyranny,
there
you go. Okay. Well,
which it suggests that they would defund the FBI.
Okay.
Because the tyranny, of course, is the Mar-a-Lago search.
That's the specific tyranny. All right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all the FBI ever does. Search Mar-a-Lago. Yeah. That's it. So, good call. Of course, they'll pay no, why they said defund the police penalty.
Yeah. No, they won't.
Work that way.
That's not how it works.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's
so anyway, there's that little thing. The Freedom Caucus and their satellite group in the Senate is trying to arguing that we should shut down or get a bill that goes into January so that we can get our paws on it then. But there's also Republicans, most of them, in most of the regular ones, arguing that they just want a clean bill, just clean, add nothing to it, except maybe I think they would probably accept the Ukraine aid that Biden administration has requested.
Yes, possibly. Now that Trump has given a speech claiming to be the champion of Ukraine.
I think the Ukraine aid will happen.
Okay.
Biden kind of shot himself in the foot on getting the COVID aid
Guns
that the
are
administration has been pushing for months.
Okay.
And that he wanted in this continuing resolution when he said on 60 Minutes the pandemic is over.
Yeah, that seemed a little... that seems to have raised some questions.
I mean, you can kind of see what he was going for.
Yes.
That, living our lives as if we were still in a pandemic is clearly over.
Yeah, so that's certainly done with. That was done much earlier. People just quit.
So that's kind of a problem for getting that really necessary funding, considering all the new variants that are popping up. And the fact that we still need vaccinations, and the fact that, they need to be doing research and development into what other variations might be coming and how you combat them. So,
right. I mean, all of that is why he was induced to say the pandemic is over. It's over because they've done terrific work funding the research to get it to this stage. And it could be
and
back
we need
further.
to keep doing that.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a tough one. I don't know precisely how that is going to play out. Also, there's probably going to need to be some more emergency relief funds, natural disaster relief funds.
Yeah, well, those we're definitely having.
Yeah.
They're not over.
Yeah. Floods, droughts, wildfires, hurricanes.
Yeah.
Poor old Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting it at both ends. Alaska was just...
Alaska
drenched.
got hit by a typhoon?
Yes. I didn't know that was a possibility. Really?
It is now.
But, yeah. I guess I thought typhoons, well, of course, they're tropical storms.
Right,
don't
tropical
often have them in Alaska. I imagine they drift up north, but I guess they just reclassify them as it's now extra tropical. They have big storms, but, well, anyway, they're flooded. And down to the opposite end of the country, Puerto Rico, they're flooded as well from another tropical storm. So we're getting it everywhere.
And the middle is either flooded, in drought-stricken, or on fire.
Fire. Yeah, right. Either flood or fire, whichever.
So, yeah, there's going to have to be more emergency funding there, natural disaster funding, probably.
Yeah.
And that's usually something Republicans swallow because, it's their states
sometimes.
too.
Sometimes, yeah. You have to make sure that you include, there have to be disasters in Republican states in order to get funding because, of course,
yes.
They'll vote, well, sometimes they lose, but they do love to vote against funding if they think the disaster is contained in a blue state.
Very much so.
That they love to do, but now they're getting it too because everybody's getting it. So yeah, maybe that'll pass. Okay, that would be helpful.
So they're working on that. Mm-hmm. The big holdup that dominated so much of the discussion for the past month is maybe sort of fading away. That was Joe Manchin's bill to relax permitting processes for energy projects.
Okay, right.
And to make sure that the pipeline in his state got approved immediately.
Sure, of course.
House balked because they weren't in on this discussion. It was a promise that Chuck Schumer made to Joe Manchin when he got Manchin to do the Inflation Reduction Act.
Right, okay.
Get Manchin's vote on this budget reconciliation bill in return for putting this permitting thing through in this must-pass continuing resolution. But apparently Schumer was the only one who agreed to that.
Oh, yeah.
Last week, Pelosi and Hoyer pop up with, on the House side, well, we did say, yeah, this is okay, we'll consider that, but we didn't say when. We didn't say anything about it being in the continuing resolution. There's upwards of 90 House Democrats who have written to Pelosi saying, decouple this thing. We can look at the permitting thing because it could actually be helpful to green energy.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good opportunity. You should say, well, we should have a separate vote. And don't worry, Joe, I'll find 10 votes for it. I'm good at it. Don't worry.
Well, that's the other problem, the 10 votes on the Senate side. Because the Republicans have come up with their own bill. They actually have legislative language, which Manchin still hasn't produced anyway.
Oh, well,
and Republicans are far more inclined to support the Republican bill than they are Manchin's. So there's no indication at all that he has 10 Republican votes for this thing and he can get it through the Senate.
Yeah, and he's already angered them once or twice with that.
How adamant is Manchin going to be about doing this on the continuing resolution? I think he's going to have to accept reality and say it's not going to happen. Okay. So at least that seems to be something we've averted.
Well, all right. I guess, we sort of have we have Republicans to maybe sort of somehow thank for that one.
I think so, which is very odd. They're mad enough at Manchin that they'll do this. I mean, that's good.
Okay.
Let's see, what else? Now instead of doing marriage equality, thank you very much, Chuck Schumer and Tammy Baldwin, they're going to do the Disclose Act.
Oh, okay.
Which is the they're pushing it as foreign interference in American elections, which I
don't like that.
I can't remember all of the stuff that's in the Disclose Act, but that's part of it.
Okay.
So that's now what Schumer says they're going to be voting on.
I see.
This week, I think. I think he already filed cloture on it.
Well, you'd have to if you're going to do it this week. It's Tuesday already. Week's almost over.
Yeah, I think it's this. To disclose super PAC donations, which is fine. It's good.
Yeah,
I would rather have forced Republicans to vote on whether or not people can marry the people they want to marry. Since it says in the bill, just one, you can only marry one other person.
Yeah, I mean, come on, that's a good concession. You should take it.
Anyway, they decided not to do that because they actually think they're going to be Republicans who will vote on it after the election, which I think is dreaming. But they fell for it. Susan Collins strikes again. Because she was the one negotiating with Tammy Baldwin, promising she would get those 10 Republican votes.
Well, she didn't say when. So, like the other agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, well, as long as she's deeply concerned, I'll know she's working diligently on it.
I mean, the Disclose Act, fine.
It's there. Take it.
It's important. Do it. Make Republicans look bad when they filibuster it.
Yes.
I don't know that it quite has the resonance with voters as everybody should be able to marry the person they want to marry.
Yes.
And get the benefits thereof.
Right.
And have it count in every state. So there's that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the decision's made, I think, and then we're just out of time to reverse it, even if we thought we could. So, okay, interesting. Disclose Act, I guess now it's like whatever's lying around.
Kinda. They could also do the contraception bill that the House passed. That'd be a good one.
Okay, true. Yes. That and another good test of make Republicans vote against something that would be wildly out of step. And presumably you could be able to get that done maybe with less resistance from Republicans than the marriage one.
You would think.
But who
But
knows?
again, they're going to raise and it's going to be Collins helping, and it's going to be religious freedom. Are pharmacists going to have to provide that birth control that you have the right to?
Yeah. I don't see why not. But yeah, they do successfully argue very frequently that they don't have to, because prescription drugs and cake are very much the same. And I don't know. You don't have to give anybody anything. Not medicine, not cakes, not nothing. Okay. That's a pretty interesting vision of America, but okay.
Well, it's where we live now.
Yes.
Kagro, it's where we live now.
This is where, we're stuck for the time being. Okay. Well,
the other movement in Congress is kind of interesting, comes from the House, and it comes from Zoe Lofgren and Liz Cheney.
Okay.
Who have their own Electoral Count Act reform bill, which is a lot sharper from what I've read thus far than the one that, again, Susan Collins has been negotiating in the Senate.
Wow, she's really central.
Yes, she is.
She's
done a great job of getting her fingers in absolutely everything and delaying it forever.
If you want something to not happen, she's your
that's
person.
What Mitch McConnell relies on when he says, "Here, Susan, go have a bipartisan gang.
Right.
Kill this thing."
Okay, but yeah, I did see that there was news and there was a fact sheet out, and it did look like it was a little more targeted, and I guess good. That's what Liz Cheney's been doing besides, I mean, in addition to the January 6th, it was all driven by what she's learned along the way.
Yes. I think it's a sort of a shot across the bow, too, to the Senate from the House saying, okay, here's our bill. We know you have yours. Here's ours. Ours is better. You're going to have to negotiate with us.
Okay. I put something aside that I can share with everybody about the fact sheet, so you can. But was there anything that jumped out about it that you thought was particularly sharp?
It's important that it requires a full third of the chamber to raise an objection.
Okay.
With the Senate side, I think it's just a fifth of both chambers.
Okay.
So a third versus a fifth is good. And I think there was something about it specifically related to anybody being investigated for violating the Espionage Act can never be president.
Okay. I imagine that results in Espionage Act charges against all former Democratic presidents from here on
right.
in. But yeah, hopefully they
their bill's a lot more pointed. There's stuff that the Senate's doing. They split out two paths, sort of. If you remember, this came up in response to to Democrats trying to pass the bill Manchin created on voting rights when he refused to vote for the House bill.
Okay.
So Manchin came up with actually what was a pretty darn good voting rights proposal and elections reform proposal that, of course, Republicans filibustered because, of course, he couldn't find 10 good Republicans to go along with it. And so, yes, Collins pops up with her, what's really much more important is the Electoral Count Act, because the only problem we had in our election last time was Trump and his fake electors. So all of the energy behind this larger voting package got channeled into the Electoral Reform Act, which is important.
Yeah.
Because, you do want to get rid of any wiggle room at all that's there for a Trump.
Yeah.
But not sufficient for dealing with the problems that we've got in our elections.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, it's been a year and a half of Collins messing around with Manchin on this stuff. The Senate also has another proposal that had come from Democrats that they're working on and will vote on that deals with protecting election workers and Secretary of State's offices and elections offices from intimidation, harassment, etc., and does more to try to secure election systems. So that's an important piece.
Yes.
That the House would probably take on, but it's probably because it's split off from the part that Collins is doing and that most Republicans will probably want to do, just to say, look, we're making sure our election integrity is there. They're probably not going to want to do the, not interfering in elections offices part. So
yes, probably.
That's why it got split out. Anyway, that's where we're at on elections reform. The House bill's a lot better. the Senate bill is going to have to be reconciled with it, I think.
All right. Well, okay, that's a good test. But any timeline? Do you think that too fits in this week?
They've been talking about, Schumer's been talking about getting it onto the floor before the election.
All right,
so that means this month, because pretty much everybody's going to be gone all of October.
That's true. Yeah, they'll be gone doing their campaigning. So, all right. Well, we'll have to see whether they can get that squeezed in or not, or they just throw their hands up and say, well, we'll get them next time.
Yeah, the next time is really scary with this election.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that they needed to do before this election. Meanwhile, they are still doing judges. Good. Yes. Yay. Get those judges in. That's important.
Good. Has to happen. Just like, so when we sneak in mention of it at the end, too. You can just confirm those judges at the end of the session as well. It's clearly important. And more so than ever, as Trump will have to appear before more and more judges as time goes on. So, okay, well, another crazy day coming to an end, and thanks again for dropping by and bringing us back, down to earth in terms of things that we actually have to legislate and laws that make we want them to make a certain amount of sense, at least from the get-go, even if judges distort them later on. But,
yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate your coming in and setting us on that path. And yeah, this other bill looks pretty good. I've got their fact sheet that they circulated on it, and it attacks the last problem in the series of problems we had with the last election, and
which is important.
Yeah,
but there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Certainly is.
That's why we've got to elect Democrats.
Yeah.
In November.
I mean, that would be a good approach to it. Let's get that done by having a Congress that has a decent head on its shoulders and will actually attack it versus attacking the rest of us, for instance.
That's the plan. Thanks,
all right.
Kagro.
All right. Thank you, Joan. Talk to you again next week.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right. Thanks again to Joan for dropping by. As always, on Tuesdays, time now, though, as always, on every day that we broadcast, to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I see the name of the Proud Boys invoked right in line 1 of today. Let's see what's going on with them and what they need to be indicted for next.